Dude,
And welcome.
it's flat colors.
It's flat colors.
But I think it's totally gradients. But
Let's chat about the future of design. Welcome back to the Monday Motion Show, where we recap what's happening in motion design and larger creative slash advertising industries.
I'm Austin Bowens,
And I'm Noah Wild.
co-founders of Revie.co, a design and animation studio on the East Coast. Let's talk about what design has been and where the hell it's going.
What has it been? It's been a lot of things so far.
I'd
My
say
gosh.
you've got the different eras, especially in motion anyway. I feel like it's easier to pick out people saying like, oh, that looks like 2013 motion, or 2016 motion or those sorts of things. So and that's at least like the time I've been in design has been around that. So here's what my guess is. We had like total resurgence of let's make shit that looks like literal things in 2011, 2012-ish, where people were like, oh, Illustrator, these different things. I can so easily make all of these different little like characters that look like real people, but like all the colors are super desaturated. Let's make like office
I love
buildings
those
and
guys. Office buildings.
cars and all this other shit. Like that very like corporate structure of video came out around that time, I imagine, because of After Effects being so much more widely available to people. Not a whole lot of lighting gradients and things. I think that was pretty much all designated to 3D at that time still.
Sure.
And
People
probably
realized they could use gradients in
Probably
2D.
Yeah. And probably up until like 2017-ish, I'd say most stuff was either if it was 2D MoGraph especially, all pretty flat stuff. What you might get is some like bevel and emboss or something. Like people started adding shading and that type of stuff, but it wasn't really stylized. It was still lots of trying to replicate like very organic stuff, but inside of this weird like geometric world. And then you start getting more of like the illustrative stuff. You get like a corporate Memphis type thing. And I'll pull some of this stuff up for reference. But good to see all of y'all. What's up, Sabrina? What up, Kai? Gideon of Adobe. Does
Adobe.
are you sponsored? Is that what's going on here? What up, Good Times HT? Glad to see you. But y'all will remember this stuff. No, you can still see my screen, yeah?
I can.
With my corporate Memphis pulled up.
Corporate Memphis.
Like,
Hello, Hinge.
this is so very, very much like
That's what it evolved into.
early
It used to be
style. Like,
worse.
yeah, early style was very like, I don't know what to call it. It just looks like early web stuff. It just looks kind of chunky and clunky, and
Yeah.
it wasn't super expressive. Like very rigid shapes, but still making realistic looking things out of that, or trying to. And then I'd say like late 2010s, we started getting into this, where it was more like these illustrators are getting involved and starting to be like, hey, but can we not make it look like crap, please? Is that okay?
They started using better color palettes. And they were like, people don't have to be people colored. Let's make their skin blue. That kind of fun stuff.
But it's always this weird pendulum, where you'll get like somebody in the chat saying skeuomorphism. iPhone comes out, everything is supposed to look like it's tactile, but it's not like as refined as it is now, so it still looks kind of like bubbly and chunky and whatever. So you get like this extreme maximalism of detail, where it's made to look like you can touch the thing. And then we sway right back into this, where that's just not at all the case. It's more stylized, like art deco-y type stuff going on. And then we start swinging back in recent years towards more gradients and shading and neo-skeuomorphism, where you're getting like the videos that are coming out where you're getting the very the tendrils of the world with the very, very light skeuomorphism, like it's all pretty diffused. That sort of shenanigans. But it keeps just swinging back and forth. There's not really a whole middle ground there yet that's been popular for a while.
It started, I think, with Apple. I mean, like people were transitioning into using from physical buttons into using, digital buttons. And so Apple was like, all right, let's make it look like a physical thing. And everyone kind of got it, and that was a thing. And then we went, but we can just make it a black box or something. and everything got very flat all of a sudden. And even the illustrations got very flat all of a sudden. No depth. Let's make it super modern. And then there was a reemergence of neoskeuomorphism or skeuomorphism called neoskeuomorphism, where it was a lot of those like I mean you've seen it before. People want to like enjoy the tactile thing. It felt very um like clean and very futuristic. Yeah, like that video.
Classic.
Uh, and I think we're kind of in like a evolution of that to where it's just like people will always enjoy tactile, at least looking things because, we are three-dimensional beings and we enjoy three-dimensional things because that's the world we live in. I don't think that's really going to go away,
Mm-mm.
but it's so clear to see that like swing from very you can essentially like coagulate it all into minimalists and maximalists, and it's like that balance they just keep kind of swapping in different areas.
I
It's like
agree with that.
how real world are we getting?
I think a lot of the swinging back and forth, and maybe this will help us better understand like what we might be able to expect in the future, uh, is largely due to just as soon as the thing becomes popular, it's not cool anymore. You know, um, you take any of the styles that we've mentioned so far, and you can find a point where they became the like vast majority of the styling for advertising that was coming out at the time. And there's two things that happen at that point. There's the just, in school, whatever, when we were all young and in school, same shit happens socially. Like as soon as the thing becomes super popular and everybody has it, it's not cool anymore. So that factor alone, just like the overabundance of a style is going to make it not as favorable anymore. But also, I think more technically, consumers start to recognize like, hey, this thing I'm seeing, this style is now associated with an ad. Like this stuff is trying to sell me stuff. And once that instinct is sort of like instilled
Built.
into the population, then you can't really use it for a while. It's got to have a cool down period. And so when you've had like when you had 3D, like this type of video coming out, like mid 2010s, it was like a whole new thing. People hadn't seen that sort of stuff except for in like movies or like super, super high value productions. And so you see that and it's like, ooh, this is this new like premium thing that I'm getting to do. And so the advertising thing is kind of like pushed off to the side. The advertising ick is kind of thrown away. But now because it's so ubiquitous with like, I mean, ever since Microsoft and thanks Tendril, I guess, for making that ubiquitous with everybody too. Ever since the Microsoft videos came out a couple years ago, now everybody and their mom is doing videos like this. We're not, unfortunately. Though I bet you can make a lot of money doing so. But all that to say, like this is now becoming something that people are just able to recognize as ads, and nobody wants to just keep getting advertised to like that. So it's going to switch back to something else. And I don't necessarily know what it is. Like right now, we're kind of in this like, as much as I love my gradients and whatever, and I still think that they'll still be around and be useful. I do think that the last couple years has been heavily dominated by like this type of 3D content where you're bringing sort of the like minimalist illustrative stuff and then making it tactile, or 2D, lots of gradients, stylized lighting, those sorts of things have been super,
Yeah.
super dominant. And that can't last forever, like
Mm-mm.
those glory days will end at some point, and we'll have something new. I
I
don't
honestly
necessarily
think
know
of
what that is, so
something
let's think
actually.
about that.
People have really been enjoying, and this is even present in like Spider-Verse. People have been all right, let me back up. So we have these physical, real imitations of buttons, and then we minimize it and we say, never mind, let's make it everything very flat. And now we're in this space of like, wait, what if we bring it back, but like in a slightly different way? And I think that's opening people's minds to like, oh, we can have we can have our cake and eat it too. Essentially, we can have like physical things, but stylize them in unrealistic ways. Like in Spider-Verse, they were doing a lot of like half toning and you can use like the depth of field effects, but instead of using blur, you use like I saw some game dev use like JPEG compression instead. And it was such a cool effect. And I think people are kind of realizing that they can really start to slot things together in new and unique ways to where not everything has to be necessarily like fully illustrative or fully like the real world. They
Mm.
can be this weird in between, and that creates some really unique things. It's kind of like the era um, of mixing, I guess. I think we've
You've
swung
coined
back
the
into
term now.
the era of mixing. It's just like all these different styles are kind of, they feel like they're kind of coming to a head where people are sort of tired of the big areas, and so there's like little niche areas of design that are popping up of like, let's have a 3D thing, but let's stylize it in a 2D way, or like let's have a 2D thing, but let's stylize it in a way nobody's ever seen before.
Mm, that makes sense
And
to me.
I don't even know if it's going to be like super easy to define. I mean, there's still going to be the massive trends, but I think at least it's going to be a little bit more creative and diverse.
I think in general, since you're starting to see so much more of that in entertainment like Spider-Verse, hopefully, or what I'm excited for anyway, will probably be a resurgence of just making art. You know, whether that's in advertising or not, I think there's just going to be a lot more competition isn't necessarily the right word. I guess more so diversity of just different interesting things, because you're not necessarily going to be locked into the box of just make it look like this because so many other people are also doing the style, you know?
Mhm.
Like I'm hoping that there is a trend away from this cycle where you just see like, oh, this video did super well, super popular. Let's also make a video just like that. And it's on everybody's mood boards and their client briefs and those sorts of things. I'm hoping that stops happening as businesses start to utilize UGC content or UGC more, and those sorts of things. And we get this more like organic advertising approach across the board. Well, hopefully it just mean that like people can really start to understand like what does the design look like for my brand. And I'm not taking that in like a perspective of it. We got to figure out what like my brand is, and that means like rounded corners and this specific typeface or whatever. And I think it's more exploratory than that. It's not
It's
just
much more
like getting people
exploratory.
to make more like brand guidelines or whatever. I think it really is kind of saying like screw the brand guidelines, like what feels
What's the
good to make
vibe?
now, you know? To be
I
very
think
Gen Z, what's the
I
vibe?
literally think that brands are just like, I don't know, what's like our brand vibe? Like what kind of colors do we use? Not what colors do we use, but like
Yeah.
what vibe of colors do we use? And I think that's I mean that's kind of much more real because brands are not, I don't think they're super like static things. They have to be able to move around with the market and what they're doing and how people are perceiving them. I think that's a much more real, organic way to exist as a brand.
Mm.
And additionally, I found the language I was looking for a little bit. People are super into mixed media. Like people love just mixing styles and stuff right now, especially with like I said, people really like texture. They do. They love some texture, but they also like that texture as an element in a larger thing that has lots of different kinds of textures and lots of different kinds of vibes that like come together to create something unique. You know, like how someone's personality is not just liking soccer, but that might be part of it, and that comes together to augment the rest of their personality. Like every little, there's lots of just mixing of design styles and kinds of media, usually inspired by different kinds of media, and it's creating this like super unique every time kind of thing. And I'm sure some versions, some formulas of different kinds of styles will emerge as some of the more popular ones. But dude, it's just cool to see.
So if you just like soccer, consider this your call out post. Okay?
That's your whole
It's
personality.
over for you now.
Called out.
Um no, I think that I guess if I can get more granular with the like it's going to be more art approach,
Hmm.
I think what that will mean in the next couple years is sort of the death of the Apple type video. You know, that's kind of Apple's already not done that for a little while now, and if they do, it's pretty rare. However, type I think generally is going to be seen as like, this is stuff that advertisers use as a whole. There's ways that people have been able to use it effectively that it doesn't have that. And I kind of hate that that's like the connotation now. But I felt myself whenever I was making all of my personal projects, only wanting to use like one piece of type and that was it for that reason. Because I knew if somebody was just like scrolling on social or whatever, the vast majority of sponsored posts would have way more type than just like what somebody's going to film on their phone, you know? And so I think there's going to be a little bit of a trend away from using type, which hopefully will be a good boost for like cell studios and things. Cause I know that they were probably concerned over that past trend. You're not seeing, I mean, you're seeing more of like a trend toward efficiency over the past like 10 years, I think, just whatever we can make fastest. And that's definitely not cell. But I think getting into more of this, like, especially during now, sorry, it's just the only reference I have for this. When NFTs were really popping off, I was shocked to see the sheer amount of brands in that space that were making like full anime scenes and shit for like an ad for themselves, you know? It's kind of cool to see that commitment to like, we're just going to make a piece of entertainment for this, you know?
That was a big plus of that. Everyone's just fucking made art.
And
It's so cool.
while Sabrina's saying, and I do agree with this, clients also reference and request art direction that has already been done before, which is predictable and profitable, instead of relying on new creative vision, which is risky. I do agree with that, or that they feel that way anyway. However, I do think it's going to eventually bite those businesses in the ass, because just trying to like chase the success that some other business already had, not necessarily a guarantee that it's going to be that profitable. Yeah, it's probably a safe decision or whatever, because you can see the public reaction to that advertising for that company already. However, I think businesses are going to start to, especially with UGC and these other sorts of things, be more willing to just take those risks, because you're not going to be able to get, it's like how at the beginning of the year we had thought about doing a subscription service for our motion design services, and the pricing for that would have been way lower. And we could have like helped guarantee our revenue and whatever. However, we would have had to have way more clientele in that system to be able to make the same amount of money compared to the amount that we can make just off of like project by project pricing and whatever. And I view that in the same way, to where like, sure, you might be able to have a more safe approach if you make a couple ads that are very similar to something else that's already been done. However, the gains that you will get from that are probably monumentally smaller than what you could get by just going and taking a chance on something. And
I definitely think
you know,
brands are wising up to that shit.
time for a little bit of risk, especially when the risk is not that grave, you know? Like the type of advertising that's being done. I mean, you can see the stuff that brand accounts are posting on TikTok now, you know? It's insane. They're all over the place. There's no real rule. I think hopefully what we'll see in this is a little bit of a death of like the current level of corporatism and professionalism that a lot of these brands have upheld for so long. There will be certain massive brands that will always have that, you know? But I think that'll be an interesting trend away. I hope anyway.
I think it'll just trend more towards being, I guess, real. Like, I think that I was reading a newsletter about this. I don't remember what they called it, but essentially like the shock value, not safe for work type of like Wendy's Twitter type of thing. Like that is like an over exaggerated correction of the pendulum of too corporate to oh my god, why are you insulting each other like little children? Playground children. And it'll kind of, I think brands will head more into just like this is what we offer. Like we're not super corporate, but we're not like insane. We're just like people trying to provide services and goods and all that jazz. More real, I guess. Which I think is what people are really looking for. So people are just hungry for real.
And not Instagram Reels, although they are hungry for those too. Much to many's dismay, but not mine. Anyway, so in summary, future looks like, we think anyway, mixed media, more art focused, more risky, and more real. Those 4 things. Lots of more, you know?
More of that.
And
more
less
of that stuff.
Less corporate, less like pre-internet buttoned up professionalism. And hot take, less type. I think there will just generally be less type going on. In motion anyway. In static, you kind of have to have it in some way, or unless the poster can talk to you.
I have recently been seeing a lot of just kind of illegible type, which I'm very excited about. I'm I'm gonna probably make a piece of content about this, but type has just become in and of itself finally become just like a visual element more so than any sort of communication tool. It's a vibe now.
Or less
And it
direct, I
doesn't
guess.
need to be super duper legible all the time. It can just exist as a thing, which is just weird and exciting. So
Cool. Well, on that note, shall we crit? Shall we crit a reel?
I'd love to create a reel.
Have a
A
little
reel
bit of a
for it.
roast sesh. All
Yes,
right,
yes,
this
please.
one comes to us from Vicky Entefellner.
Dude, my
They've
sunglasses
participated in a
are.
couple. Oh, sorry, am I making you look silly now
No,
about
yeah.
not having sunglasses?
No,
Okay.
do your intro.
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
your
yeah.
intro. One
I
sec,
got
one
you.
second.
Vicky has participated in a lot of the challenges in our Discord, so there's some of that work in here. But wanted to submit their reel for us to take a look at. And now that we both have our sunglasses on, we can be as mean as we want. And that's what
Good thing
matters.
my apartment is 5 feet long.
Here we go.
The show will be. I got the crow.
The crow. Boom. Let me play that
Love
again,
that
but I'm gonna just
jacket.
turn the sound off. Couple notes off the top
I.
of my head.
What does it sound like? I couldn't hear it.
Oh, you couldn't hear the sound?
I'm curious though.
It's like a jazzy thing.
Oh,
I'm surprised
jazzy fits.
you couldn't hear it though, because I was sharing the application. Anyway,
Okay.
couple things off the top of my head. Intro feels long. Um, I hovered at like 30 seconds, so I say probably you could get it down to around that amount. I swear it's not just my
At
attention
least.
span.
I have it sooner.
It's
I'm worse.
so here's I think the thing that would help pull people through the reel the most. You've got a good diversity of shots, but it doesn't really feel like they lean into each other necessarily. And I mean that in a couple different ways. Like it just doesn't feel like it picks up momentum to like really push me past that 30-second mark, in the sense that the cuts aren't like super well timed to the music. It feels like there's a couple spots where it's like just not on the parts that are the hardest hitting. I know you can't hear the jazz notes, so that probably doesn't make sense to you. But it just doesn't really feel like there's enough oomph at some of those cuts. And what would really help sell them more is if you just scale your pieces up a tiny bit and then add some follow through. Like that shot where you've got the pancake that's coming back down into the pan. If you could then have some like movement down into the next shot, just to help that follow through. It all helps make it feel like it's all one cohesive thing instead of a bunch of separate pieces, you know, and helps really pull the person along to the very end. But you could very easily shave like 3 to 4 seconds off of this intro, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe even just have like your name pops up at the beginning here, and then you just make sure you've got like an email or something at the end. You always want to make sure you've got some way for people to contact you at the end of a reel. Or better yet, have something at the beginning if you really want to make sure that they have a way to contact you, because some people might just not watch all the way through to the end, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the overarching like real optimization thoughts for me. I think there are some shots in here that are just better than others. I would encourage you to really take another pass of being like, does everything in here feel like it's at the same level?
And is everything in here something that you would want to like do again or in
Yeah.
another project?
Yeah.
That's an important consideration too. People will hire you for your work, and that means they'll want something similar to your work. So that's
Right.
why they're hiring you.
Because I know the stuff that you've submitted for Ravid challenges has had great easing. I was kind of surprised by some of the shots in here that they didn't. I can tell that they're older, you know. They just don't quite feel like they match up with what you can currently do. So yeah, I would say try and shorten it. Easy ways to do that are by shortening the intro, as well as really going through and taking another pass at like, do these feel like they match the quality of what you can bring, you know?
It's okay to have a shorter reel. It's nice.
Yep. Boom roasted, kind of simmery, I guess. On that note,
We'll put on low and let sit for like 30 minutes.
Yeah. Let's take a look at a rec real quick. I'll take my sunglasses off there. This one is a video I saw on Twitter. I mean X. I mean Twitter. I mean what? Anyway, from Romain Lubersan. Sorry if I mispronounced that. But I just love this thing. It's great. Now I'm gonna try and get sound for you real quick. Hold on.
Oh shucks, that's so candy.
You let me know if that works.
Yes.
Okay, great. Fabulous. Then in that case,
I love him.
Here we go. I love this thing. And it loops, so of course I enjoy it. But like, I don't know, man. The art direction, it's so solid all the way through. And the little, just the sound design helps add so much. I just love how much tension he's able to add to every single piece of this, you know? Like, you really get into that, like, slow-mo mode where you know it's just gonna... Because tennis is so fast. It's cool to be able to see, like, some of those moments really highlighted with the slow-mo and that sort of stuff. It's a hard thing to get that to happen in Motion 2.
He did it in so few frames, too.
I know.
That's fantastic.
I love this thing. Great. I will send the link in the chat. Don't worry.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff.
Cool.
My gosh.
What a treat and a treasure.
What a treat and a treasure, as I always say.
There's
and
the
with that,
link for y'all.
That is the show. We're keeping it short these days, y'all.
Yep. Keeping it short. Yep. That's it. That's the show. Be sure to join the Discord, review Discord. There's about 3,000 motion designers, sound designers, graphic designers from all over the world, and they're now
all doing mixed media.
They're all on the future of design.
Yeah.
Also, submit your work below. There's a link in the description for critique. Use hashtag MondayMotionShow on social, and we just might wreck it. We'll see y'all next week. Peace.